Imagine being a child on Christmas Eve. You're in bed, but the excitement keeps you from sleeping. The warm cocoa you drank makes your eyelids grow heavy, but you still strain to hear those famous bells and the rustle of movement from the roof. Your family peer through the door, giving a warm, sad smile. They know as all children grow, and as each year passes, the magic of Christmas will start to weather like a rock facing an ocean. But for one child, the magic of Christmas is kept alive forever, and it all starts with a very special train. Chris van Allsburg has always had a love for Christmas. He remembers fondly the store trips to Erpelsheimer's, and it was his memories that inspired him to write and illustrate children's stories. His stories were an instant hit, and his art is seen on classics such as The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe as a book cover. Chris started writing in 1979 with his Caldecott Prize runner-up The Garden of Abdul Ghazai, and branched into visual production 10 years later, working with Disney on The Little Mermaid as a visual development artist. In 1994, Chris was approached by TriStar Pictures with a view to making a movie out of one of his picture books. Chris agreed, excited at the new venture, and agreed to help write the screenplay. The film Jumanji is now a family classic and has spawned several spin-off movies, including the sequel Zathura, which was another one of Chris's books, and its own TV show. In 1985, Chris took pen to paper and wrote The Polar Express. The book was a hit, selling more than 1 million copies in its first 4 years. It sat on several bestseller lists for many years and even made an appearance on the New York Times bestseller list. It was a staple for many classrooms, and teachers would rate the book as one of the best examples of children literature in the country. In 2004, Warner Brothers and Castle Rock Entertainment wanted to take the book to a new generation and adapted the book into a movie. The book itself is not very long, so turning a 14-minute book into a 100-minute movie was no mean feat. They wanted to keep the feel of the book, so they ensured that many of the main features were retained. Like the book, the lead boy and the newly added lead girl remained unnamed. But unlike the book, the movie focuses more on the train and the journey to the North Pole and the engine's arrival, with the principal action taking place either on the engine, the carriages, or on the tracks. One of the film's most unique aspects was its cast list. Tom Hanks takes the lead role as several characters: the conductor, the boy's father, the Scrooge puppet, Santa Claus and the narrator, as well as providing the principal movement to many of the characters, including the lead boy through motion capture, so the animators had a ground frame to work from. The film also included actor Michael Jetta, who played driver and fireman Smokey and Steamer, who sadly passed away before the film's released, and the film was dedicated to his memory. Although the engine in the book was not specified, its location and age lent the engine to be a large tender engine for the US Railroad. The movie took a real basis and was modelled after the 284 Père Marquette 1225, a Berkshire-type locomotive. The movie makers could have taken any engine, but specifically chose this one in order to tie the movie to the author. Père Marquette was on static display near the Spartan Stadium in East Lansing in Michigan, and there was no doubt that Chris would have seen this engine when he attended university and attended football games as a child. Warner Brothers didn't just want to make a carbon copy of the locomotive, however, and made significant changes such as a larger cowcatcher and a headlight mounted into the smokebox. Some have said the changes may have changed its class, with some comparing the engine to an S1, and the whistle was recorded from the Sierra Railway No. 3. The carriages themselves, though, are much more difficult to place for real-life references. They carry the same styling as a Pullman, but without the elaborate decoration inside. The Grand Canyon Railway, though, have managed to recreate coaches with the Polar Express livery, and they use them during the winter. Both the movie and the book have inspired heritage railways around the world, and many heritage sites offer a Polar Express similar to the book. The railways encourage parents and children to arrive in pyjamas and dressing gowns to board the train and listen to music and drink hot chocolate before meeting Santa at the North Pole, before heading back to the home, tired, bellies full and presents in hand. The Polar Express for me is a timeless classic, and I was so excited I brought this video forward to share with you. I want you all to have an amazing Christmas, and I want to thank you for all your kindness and wonderful comments and suggestions. You are all amazing, and as a thank you, I want to share with you this wonderful tale of the Polar Express. So grab your mulled wine, hot cider or hot chocolate, grab your comfy robes, snuggle into that blanket, because it's time I told you a very special story. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend had told me I'd never hear. The ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. "There is no Santa," my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly round it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, then looked up to my window. I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out the door. "All aboard!" the conductor cried out as I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "are you coming?" "Where?" I asked. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took out his outstretched hand, and he pulled me aboard. The train was filled with other children, all in their pyjamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies with nugget centres as white as snow. We drank hot coca as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of the towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. Soon, there were no more lights to be seen. We travelled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. We climbed mountains so high it seemed we would scrape the moon. But the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned into hills, the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "is the North Pole." The North Pole is a huge city, sitting alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first, we saw no elves. "They are gathering at the centre of the city," the conductor told us. "That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." "Look!" shouted one of the children. "The elves!" Outside we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the centre of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no further, We stopped and the conductor led us outside. We pressed through the crowd to a large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing their silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound like nothing I'd ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us, pointing to me, and said, "Let's have this fellow here." I jumped in his sleigh. The conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee and he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine. But the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled. He gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from the reindeer harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, "The first gift of Christmas!" A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me and I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted to the reindeer's names, cracked his whip. His team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled once above us, then disappeared into the cold, dark polar sky. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I had lost the bell from Santa Claus's sleigh. "Let's hurry outside and look for it," one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We're on our way home. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled out. He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Merry Christmas!" he shouted. The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box behind the tree. It had my name on it. Inside was a silver bell. There was a note. "Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C." I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," said my father, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me, as it always does for those who truly believe.